Gauge swatching. We all hate to do it, but we also all know the importance of doing it. Sometimes we do it and we feel like our swatch lies to us. And sometimes they do. And most often when that happens, it is because we do a very small gauge swatch. You're much more likely to get an accurate stitch count if you measure over a larger piece of fabric. I always do my gauge swatches the same way, or most always. There are some cases if I've got a lot of patterning in my swatch or in my sweater that I'm going to knit, I would probably knit an entire repeat of the cable or the colorwork pattern, or sometimes maybe more than one, so I can average it out over a greater number of stitches. When I'm doing stockinette stitch, I cast on 36 stitches and work several rows in garter stitch, then begin working in stockinette stitch if that is what the gauge is given in, and I do the first 3 stitches and the last 3 stitches in garter stitch so that I've got a nice frame that I can measure. I also do 30 rows, and that's what these markers are. There's 10 stitches, 20 stitches, and then 30 stitches. So I've got 30 stitches across here. So let's just measure from this border to this border. I am just shy of 6 inches on this. Really very, very close. So I'm going to say 6 inches over 30 stitches. So we need to find out how many stitches in 1 inch divided by the measurement, which is 6. So we've got 5 stitches per inch. Generally, the pattern gives you the gauge in 4 inches, so we'll just multiply that times 4. 20 stitches in 4 inches is our stitch gauge, or 5 stitches per inch. Now our row gauge, again, we know it's 30 rows, and we're going to measure from here to here, and we've got, okay, so 4.375. Okay, so we've got 30 rows divided by 4.375, and that's 6.857 rows per inch. We'll multiply that whole thing, even though it goes out way more decimal points than we need it, but we get a more accurate number if we use the whole thing. So we'll multiply that times 4, 27.42 rows in 4 inches. That is how you measure your row gauge and your stitch gauge. Now once you've got that measured, and when I knit this, I also block it according to the instructions on the yarn, the same way I would block the garment, because you want this to be a finished gauge rather than your gauge before blocking, because that always is a little bit different. So if you want your sweater to fit, always best to launder and block your swatch. And I don't do any stretching of the swatch. I get it wet and I lay it flat to dry. If it's a superwash yarn and I know I'm going to dry it in the dryer, then I dry the swatch in the dryer. Now, once you're knitting a sweater, you can double check to see what your gauge is. Now, this is knit in the round, so it's a little bit difficult to measure, but we can get a good idea. I know I have got 160 stitches right here. And so I'm going to measure that and then double it, and we'll figure out what gauge we're getting on this. We want to try and be as straight as possible. I'm at 17.5 inches, so 35 inches around. That's pretty close to what I want. This is not blocked, so I know it will get a little bit bigger. We've got 160 stitches. 160 stitches divided by 35 4.57 stitches per inch. 18.28 stitches equal 4 inches. And I figured my gauge was somewhere between 4.5 and 5 stitches per inch. So it's closer to the 4.5 per inch. I was afraid if it's closer to 5, it was going to be bigger than I wanted. So you can always test that while you're knitting. Would have been even better to test this after I blocked it. And a lot of times in sweaters, I will block mid-sweater just to make sure that I'm on the right track. The more often you can check, the better off you are, and the greater number of stitches that you're averaging your gauge on, the more accurate it will be. That's how I gauge swatch. If you like this, if it helped you, please hit the like button and subscribe. If you have any questions or want to leave a comment, you could leave it below, or you can contact me through my website, which is Wise Owl Knits.